Warning, the following is a review of Saga, a mature reader's comic from Image. While any scenes of nudity have been removed, the comic still contains graphic violence, foul language, and references to underage sex trafficking. Viewer discretion is advised. Starting in 2010, writer Brian K. Vaughan began fleshing out a concept for an epic space opera he had originally conceived of back in his youth while he was, quote, bored in math class, unquote. The idea of a long-form story spanning multiple years was nothing new to Vaughan, who is best known for books like Why the Last Man, Ex Machina, and to a lesser extent Runaways. This new Saga would be different. This would be a 108-issue-long story covering the war between the winged citizens of a planet called Landfall and the horned magical-wielding denizens of one of Landfall's moons called Wreath. This war grew to be so devastating that eventually both sides had to outsource their battlefield to other planets. One of the planets is called Cleve, and it's here where the conflict would get turned on its head. A Wreather named Marco would take a vow of pacifism and desert his military post in order to be taken into custody by the Landfallians. While being held prisoner, he formed a bond with his prison guard, a Landfallian woman named Lana. The two ended up forming a bond, and Alana would soon desert her post in order to elope with Marco. Soon after, Alana would become pregnant. With that, the burgeoning family would have to go on the run from both the Landfallians and the Wreathers in order to find some type of respite to safely raise their new child. And that is where this story picks up. Vaughan will be joined by artist-slash-colorist Fiona Staples for this new story, the first part of which we're looking at today. This is Saga, Volume 1. Alana and Marco take refuge in an old body shop just as she starts going into labor. She turns down her husband's offer of a magic epidural as she manages to push hard enough to produce a baby girl. Alana begins breastfeeding the baby as Marco tries to remove the umbilical cord, and even though he has a perfectly fine sword, he refuses to use it because of his vow of pacifism, meaning he has to gnaw through it with his teeth. The two begin discussing names, with Alana wanting Pico and Marco wanting Beatrice. The argument is interrupted by Landfallian forces knocking on the body shop's door. Marco wants Alana to take flight, but that just isn't possible due to the baby weight. The Landfallians burst through the door, but just as soon, Wreather forces pop up as well. Both sides open fire, with the new family caught in the middle. Somehow, someway, the family is spared, with Alana just having a minor wing wound, and the two warring soldier factions have taken each other out. The informant who tipped off both militaries tries to make peace before dying by passing on a map with a possible escape attempt off Cleve. Word of the incident makes its way back to Landfall, where they contact the Robot Kingdom. The robots act as military strategists/officer types for the Landfallian forces. They request the usage of Prince Robot IV. However, the prince is not too pleased with this, as he just ended a long tour of duty and was busy reconnecting with his wife when the call came in. The prince has filled in on the situation with Alana and Marco, including the baby. There has been Wreather propaganda spread about Landfallian women being forcibly impregnated, but the children only die within the span of a year. So the fact that these two are married is presenting a new wrinkle into the situation. The prince is dispatched to locate the family and take them down before any other word gets out. Back on Cleve, Marco and Alana discover that the map they received is to a location called the Rocket Ship Forest, where spaceships grow on trees. Marco thinks this is just a myth, but Alana points out they really have no other choice at this point. Of course, the new family is not just on the run from Landfallian forces, as the Wreather leaders are interested as well, but they've taken an alternative path. A woman named Vez announces that a bounty has been placed on the family. First up, she contacts the best bounty hunter in the galaxy, the Will. Now, in Saga, bounty hunters like the Will are called freelancers, and the Will is also accompanied by a loquacious lie-detecting cat called, well, Lying Cat. The Wreather forces have also contacted the Will's ex-girlfriend, the Stalk. Now, the Stalk is effectively part woman, part spider, with the woman half being topless. So, in other words, while she does technically appear in the story, you're not really going to be seeing much of her. The contract is clear. Kill the parents, but the child is to be delivered alive and unharmed. The will is also given a limitless credit card to cover expenses as Vez leaves. Back on Cleve, Marco and Alana try to make their way through a dark and very expensive forest. The forest is rumored to be haunted by the vengeful spirits of Cleve called the Horrors. The family doesn't bump into any spirits, but they do come across a battle between Landfallian and Reether forces. They slink back into the forest to avoid detection. On the plus side, they have settled on a name for the baby, Hazel. They soon find themselves caught up in a series of vines, which Marco could easily cut through with his sword, except for his vow of pacifism. As all this is happening, Prince Robot IV arrives on Cleve, where he's greeted by a soldier named McHenry. When asked about Alana, McHenry only knows that she spent most of her time reading trashy romance novels. The novel that Alana called her favorite she loaned to McHenry, and she now passes it along to the prince. Back with Alana, Marco, and Hazel, the trio encounter the Stalk, and Alana immediately recognizes the Freelancer, but not before Marco gets hit with a venomous sting. The Stalk then mentions needing Hazel alive, causing Alana to turn her gun on the baby. Even though this is a stun gun, the stun would still be too much for a newborn child to bear. All of this gets interrupted by the sudden appearance of the Horrors, which is enough to drive the Stalk away, advising that Alana is better off killing Hazel. Alana checks on Marco, who is in bad shape, and it's then that the Horrors reveal themselves. In reality, the Horrors are just the spirits of indigenous people of Cleve that happen to get caught in the crossfire. The killing the spirits have been perpetrating is merely an illusion that they can project. One spirit named Isabel offers to help Alana and Marco to get to a snowy area, as snow is needed to perform a healing spell. The price, Isabel must be bonded to Hazel's soul, which will allow her to leave the planet. Alana has no other choice but to accept. Back with the Landfallian forces, the prince is interrogating one of the other prisoners. It doesn't really go anywhere, and McHenry winds up interrupting before any further beatdown can commence. As all this is happening, the Stalk finds herself on the run from a group of wild pigs. She places a call to the Will with an offer to team up, but he hasn't forgiven her for cheating on him during their last mission. Instead, he opts to go and use his limitless credit card on the pleasure planet of Sextillion. Meanwhile, Isabel and the family arrive at a quiet cave on a mountainside full of snow. Isabel explains that her family are freedom fighters who built escape tunnels throughout Cleve, and that she was killed when she inadvertently stepped on a landmine. Isabel is bonded to Hazel's soul, and the healing ritual is performed on Marco. It doesn't go smoothly though, as Marco mentions loving a woman named Gwendolyn. An incensed Alana begins plotting to kill Marco just as soon as he recovers from nearly dying. However, all of this seems to be forgotten when Marco awakens. Alana immediately starts kissing him. She does manage to ask about Gwendolyn. Meanwhile, on Sextillion, the Will is forced to wander around without Lion Cat, who has to stay back on the ship due to the planet's no-pet policy. The Will is unimpressed by what he seems until he bumps into someone who offers him some real treats. The Will is taken to a place where he's offered a 6-year-old girl as a sex slave. The Will is so appalled that he winds up killing the scum merchant and trying to leave with the girl whose name is Sophie. However, he still has to buy Sophie's freedom as she's outfitted with a special device that will poison her to death should she try to escape Sextillion without being paid for. Back with Isabel and the family, Marco explains that Gwendolyn is his ex-fiancée from a high-ranking political family. The two were high school sweethearts who planned to marry as soon as Marco's service ended. However, the two began growing apart as time went on and Marco began to realize the futility of war. The reason he never told Alana about Gwendolyn was because she had said that their pasts didn't matter and the two eventually make up. The next morning, the family awakened to the sight of a Landfallian attack ship bearing down on their location. With no other choice, Marco unsheaths his sword and prepares to defend his family. As all of this is happening, Prince Robot IV sits on the john reading Alana's book when he receives a call from his wife. She's pregnant. Either that or someone's just trying to use her to brew beer. The news takes the prince aback as he now knows he'll miss the birth of his child if he doesn't locate his quarry quickly. Thankfully, things seem to be going his way as McHenry rushes in to tell him that the family has been located. Back on the mountain, the Landfallian soldiers confirm their order to kill and prepare to open fire. One bullet apparently strikes Alana and Marco flies into a rage that results in the whole troop being slaughtered. Thankfully, Alana just has a mere flesh wound and the family leave in the Landfallian carrier after Alana rips the GPS unit out. Meanwhile, the Stalk arrives on the scene with the Landfallian troops just as she receives a call from the Will, who now seems very open to working with her. However, it's at this point that Prince Robot IV and Corporal McHenry arrive, and when they see what they think is the Stalk trying to go for a weapon, they wind up opening fire and killing her immediately, the Will overhearing everything. The family arrives at the rocket ship forest only to find it entirely burned down. Isabel pops up as it's now nightfall so she can appear. Isabel then points out that this is just another illusion and reveals that the rockets don't grow on trees. They grow as if they are trees. There's just one catch. The ship requires a sacrifice to power up. To go somewhere new, something of real value must be left behind. Marco offers up his sword. This way, he can never be tempted to use it again. It works as the ship comes to life after the blade is snapped. The ship begins to take off after everyone boards, and Alana wants it directed to the planet Quietus. She wants Hazel to meet the man she believes is the smartest in the universe. Meanwhile, Prince Robert IV contacts his superiors about the freelancer he just killed being employed by the Reethers. He also has a feeling where the family might be headed. It turns out that Quietus is the home of Dr. Oswald Heist, the author of Alana's dime store romance novels. The prince isn't the only one hot on the family's tail, as soon the rocket begins detecting a magic vessel approaching. Marco realizes that when his sword was snapped, it triggered a tracking spell. Alana believes it to be Gwendolyn, as two Reethers suddenly appear on board the ship. One of them zaps Isabel, while Alana blasts the female member of the duo with her stun gun. Marco then intercedes, telling everyone to stand down. He then introduces Hazel to her grandparents. That concludes Volume 1 of Saga. How was it? Well, this really does put the opera in space opera. This is a lot of really good nuanced characterization and nuanced storytelling that has a great combination of both grandiose and gravitas, and some top-notch artwork from Fiona Staples. If there is a drawback to this, I would say it is the amount of nudity that's in the book. I mean, I'm not a prude, I'm not against things like a woman breastfeeding her child, but things like, say, the sex planet of Sextillion and some of the stuff that goes on there, and the robot sex, and this is the series that famously got the Comixology app kicked out of the Apple App Store. So, yeah, you can kind of see where that would happen. I mean, we didn't cover the issue in question, but you can see how that could happen. Also, the narrative seems to jump around a little bit too much. I mean, this is maybe a bit on the nitpicky side, but there's these points where we're following the family, and then suddenly we're following Prince Robot IV for just like a page. I mean, and nothing more than that. And then we're following the will for like a page, and then nothing more of that. Like, it gets better towards the end of the volume, I think, where they start putting these things at the beginning and kind of the end of the book, so it does feel like it has a bit more of an add to it, and we're focusing more on the family, which I think is probably the strongest point. So it does get better, but really that is kind of my only real nitpick with that. I mean, I know it's a nitpick, but I am going to give Saga an A with the proviso that, yes, this is a mature reader's book, so there's a lot of content in here that's not really for everyone. And with that, let's see what we'll be doing next time on the Random Trade Review. Hey guys, got a request for the show? Check out my Patreon at patreon.com/sleepytimeforcatproductions. And if you like the video, give it a like, share it, subscribe, and ring that notification bell.